My name is Sabrina Hollis, and at my sister's wedding, I was practically invisible. Not in the poetic, no one understands me kind of way. I mean, I was actually invisible. At least, that's how everyone treated me. My mother had sat me at the outer ring of tables, right next to the speakers, too loud for conversation and too far for family photos. No one asked how I was doing. No one even looked my way, unless it was to hand me an empty glass and assume I'd take it to the bar. Then came the moment I knew would sting. My sister's boss arrived, Cale Donnelly, CEO of some trendy fintech startup, dressed in navy and arrogance. I watched him shake hands with my father, laugh with my uncle, give my sister a big warm hug. And then, he looked straight through me like I was staff resetting the dessert table. I could have swallowed it. I'd swallowed worse. But that man's smirk, the way he tilted his glass toward my sister and said, "Impressive crowd, Aubrey," like I wasn't even standing there. That was the moment I decided. I'd say one sentence, just one, and by the time I finished, he would nearly drop his drink. Growing up, Aubrey was always the one with the spotlight. She had the dimples, the straight-A report cards, the charm that made every adult want to pinch her cheek or buy her ice cream. I was the quieter one, the girl with calloused fingertips and messy notebooks, building things in the garage, or staying up late teaching myself how to write code when no one was looking. But in our house, if it couldn't be printed on a Hallmark card or posted on Mom's Facebook, it didn't count. By the time we were adults, the difference only widened. Aubrey went into marketing, something glamorous and visible. She had the heels, the company-branded mugs, the team lunches, and happy hours. She once posted a photo of her open laptop next to a mimosa on a beach and captioned it, #BossLife. My work? Well, I consulted for small venture firms, sometimes startups, sometimes private clients, always NDA'd, always behind the scenes. To my family, that translated to Sabrina just does things online. One year, my mother actually introduced me at Thanksgiving as between jobs right now. I had just finished helping a green tech company secure $12 million in backing. I smiled and passed the mashed potatoes. The truth was, I didn't care anymore. Or maybe I had trained myself not to. There's only so many times you can correct someone before you realize they don't want to understand. They just want a simple box to put you in. But Aubrey knew. She and I weren't close. Not anymore. Not after she accidentally left me out of her promotion celebration dinner. Not after she told people I still lived in my old apartment, even though I'd moved 2 years earlier. It was all these little paper cuts, casual lies meant to trim me down until I fit into the role she wanted, the older sister, who never quite made it. So I let her have her show. I RSVP'd to her wedding on time. I wore the dress she requested, muted color, conservative cut. I even offered to help with the setup, and she politely declined, saying, "You don't need to stress yourself out, just enjoy the day." The day arrived, and everything was fine. The kind of fine that has a sharp edge to it. I greeted relatives who forgot I existed, smiled through small talk with people who asked, "So, what are you up to these days?" in that tone that means, still unemployed. When the ceremony ended and the reception began, I found my seat near the edge of the room. It was close enough to hear the music, far enough to be out of every photo. My place card had been misspelled, Sabina. But at that point, I just chuckled and set it aside. I watched Aubrey glide through the room like a swan in chiffon. Every move was curated. Her husband, Cameron, was tall and silent, always trailing half a beat behind her like a well-trained shadow. And then came Cale Donnelly, her boss, the crown jewel. I knew who he was, of course. Everyone did. The man had been on Forbes' 30 under 30 list, the kind of CEO who wore sneakers with a blazer and talked about disruption like it was a personal hobby. People said he was a genius. I had my doubts. When he passed me without a glance, I didn't flinch. Not outside, anyway. Inside, something settled, like a lock clicking into place. Because sometimes being invisible is exactly the power you need. The moment Cale Donnelly stepped into the reception hall, it was like someone had turned up the wattage in the room. Heads turned, conversations paused. Even people who didn't know who he was seemed to register that someone important had arrived. The kind of man who didn't have to prove his status. He wore it like a tailored suit, which, of course, he was wearing. Navy, perfectly cut, no tie, just the right amount of disheveled, like he had money, but didn't need to try. He moved slowly, like he expected the room to orbit around him. And it did. My mother looked ready to faint from pride. She waved him over with both hands, like an airport attendant. "Cale! Over here!" I watched him glide toward our table. My father stood to greet him. My uncle adjusted his jacket, like he was preparing for a job interview. Even Cameron, the groom, seemed to take a step back when Cale approached. He shook hands, gave a smooth smile, laughed on cue. Then he turned to Aubrey. "You look stunning," he said. She did. That was never in question. She had the kind of bridal glow that couldn't be bought, because it came from knowing the world was built to applaud you. She beamed up at him, fingers brushing his arm lightly, like they were co-stars in a film. Then he said it. "Impressive crowd, Aubrey." I was standing less than 3 feet away, and when his eyes passed over me, I don't think he saw me as a person. Not a name, not a guest, just air, no pause, no nod, not even polite confusion. It was practiced, reflexive, dismissal. I'd expected it. Even so, it stung more than I thought it would. To him, I was some woman standing near the bridal party, maybe a cousin, maybe a +1, someone not important enough to place or acknowledge. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I sat back down, slowly, letting silence settle around me like fog. The table was alive with energy. My aunt started telling Cale about Aubrey winning some award in college. My mother added that Aubrey had always been a natural leader. I tuned them out. Instead, I watched him. Cale. I knew more about his company than he probably realized. I'd read their pitch decks. I'd tracked their Series B round closely because Carradine Capital had considered a small stake, but pulled back, on my recommendation. Their platform looked sleek, but they were bleeding retention, and their Latin America rollout had backfired with compliance issues and bad UX. I wrote the memo that made Carradine say, "Not yet." I wrote it at 3 a.m. after digging through customer churn reports Cale probably hadn't read himself. Cale never saw my name on the memo, but he felt the result. He just didn't know it had come from me, until now. I turned my glass slowly, my fingers wet with condensation. My heart was beating faster than I liked. My pulse was steady, but I knew the sensation of adrenaline creeping in. I could have let it go, stayed silent, let him enjoy his moment. But I was tired, not angry, not emotional, just tired of being invisible. So I stood. No one noticed at first. The music had picked up. A few guests had started dancing. Laughter rolled from the other end of the room. Cale was still at the head of the table, talking with my cousin. I walked straight to him. Not with force, just quiet presence. He didn't look until I was standing there. Then I said, calm as anything, "Just so you know, your Series B valuation's going to drop if your platform keeps bleeding retention like this." The words landed like a soft blade. He blinked, and for the first time all night, he looked at me, not through me, at me. His hand faltered. The champagne tilted. A drop slid down the side and hit the floor. "Aubrey," he said. "Who is this?" She stammered. "My sister, Sabrina." Something clicked in his expression, like an old file loading. "Sabrina Hollis?" I gave him a small smile. "That's right." He stared, and just like that, I wasn't invisible anymore. Recognition is a strange thing. It doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it's a twitch of the jaw, a recalibration of the gaze, a second where someone's brain catches up to what their ego missed the first time. Cale Donnelly stared at me, like he was watching his past decisions rearrange themselves, like he was remembering a name from a list he should have paid closer attention to. "You're Sabrina Hollis," he said finally, voice lower, more careful. I smiled. "Yes, we've never met officially, but you've definitely seen my comments. Or rather, your board has." Aubrey looked back and forth between us like someone had just changed the language mid-conversation. "Wait, what's happening?" Cale didn't answer her. He was too busy doing the math, connecting timelines, matching advisory reports to the name he'd just dismissed at a family wedding. You work with Carradine Capital, he said. Not a question. A memory, I shrugged. Among others, Carradine wasn't just a capital firm. It was one of the quieter power players, known for early backing in now household name tech companies. I'd been working with them as an independent strategic advisor for almost 5 years. My role wasn't loud, and it was never public, but behind closed doors, my analysis helped shape acquisition deals and product pivots that made or broke startups like his. He cleared his throat. I wasn't aware they had. He stopped himself. I didn't realize you were. I let him squirm, just a little. Aubrey finally hissed. Why didn't you ever tell me you worked in tech? Like, seriously worked? I turned to her, voice still calm. You never asked. That part wasn't petty, it was the truth. My sister had spent so many years assuming I was drifting through life, doing nothing of consequence, that she'd stopped listening long before I had anything worth saying. Behind us, a small group of guests had started to hover, pretending to sip drinks, clearly eavesdropping. I stepped back slightly to give Cale space to recover, but he didn't move. He looked different now. Not rattled, but alert, like he was trying to reorient himself, like I was a puzzle piece that had been upside down this whole time, and he'd just realized where I actually fit. I remember your review, he said. It was direct. It was accurate. He laughed under his breath. Yeah, it was. Aubrey's smile had vanished. Are you seriously standing here talking business at my wedding? She snapped. Cale turned to her. Aubrey, your sister is. He paused. Let's just say she's someone I should have recognized. Sooner. I didn't stay much longer. I wasn't there to gloat. The point had been made. As I turned to leave, Cale reached into his jacket. May I? He asked, holding out a card. I accepted it without looking. I'll think about it. He nodded. I'd appreciate that. As I walked back to my table, Sabrina, according to the place card, I caught my mother watching me. Her expression was hard to read. Confused? Curious? Maybe just unsettled by the fact that something had shifted, and she hadn't seen it coming. At my seat, I finished the last sip of champagne. It tasted the same, but it felt different. Because sometimes power isn't about money, or fame, or the spotlight. Sometimes it's about timing, precision, and knowing exactly when to remind the room who you are, especially when they've already decided you're no one. The rest of the evening shifted like a slow, deliberate turn of a dial. The music stayed the same. The lights didn't flicker, but the energy was different. It was no longer Aubrey's perfect wedding. It was the wedding where her sister surprised everyone. I could feel it in the way people looked at me. Before, I was wallpaper. Now, I was a curiosity. One of the groomsmen, a guy who had barely acknowledged me earlier, stopped by my table with a sudden smile. I heard what you said to Cale, he said, like it was a compliment. Didn't know you were in the business. In a way, I replied. He nodded like he understood, but he didn't. Most of them wouldn't. That was fine. I didn't need them to understand the mechanics, just the shiftance. A few cousins approached next, their voices syrupy with surprise. You never mentioned you work in venture capital. I didn't correct them. Let them believe what they wanted. Even my Aunt Denise, who once offered to help me apply for a real job, tried to corner me near the dessert table with a soft, apologetic tone. You've always been so private. We didn't realize. I gave her a kind smile. That's all right. I wasn't asking to be realized. But it was my mother's stare I felt the most. From across the room, through clinks of cutlery and the shuffle of heels, her gaze tracked me like she was reevaluating a number that had never added up. She didn't come to me, not immediately. My mother is not the type to admit she was wrong. Instead, she sent signals. The narrowed eyes, the stiff posture, the way she whispered something to Aunt Trudy while tilting her chin toward me. I knew that posture, that calculation. Sabrina had become useful, and that was the only kind of interesting my mother ever respected. I let her watch. Aubrey was another matter. She approached later, somewhere between the father-daughter dance and the cake cutting. Her makeup was flawless, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Can we talk?" she asked. We stepped outside onto a balcony strung with lights. The sounds of laughter and glass tapping were muffled behind us. For a moment, it felt like we were 16 again, sneaking out to breathe when the house got too loud. "You made a scene," she said. "I spoke one sentence. You humiliated me in front of my boss." I leaned against the railing. "No," I reminded him, "I exist. That's not the same thing." Aubrey crossed her arms. "You should have told me what you do. That you're whatever that is." "I tried, years ago. You weren't interested." "That's not fair." "It's honest." She looked away. "Mom's already saying she knew you were special. She's going to act like she saw it coming all along." I smiled at that. "She always rewrites the story. But you had the real version. You just didn't want to believe it." Aubrey swallowed. "Why didn't you ever fight for space? You let us treat you like background, and now you want credit for being center stage." I turned to face her fully. "I don't want center stage. I never did. But I won't apologize for not being small enough to ignore anymore." She didn't respond. That silence between sisters is a familiar thing. Thicker than anger, deeper than resentment. It's the space where all the unsaid things live. I let it stretch. Then I said, "I'm happy for you, Aubrey. I mean that. You looked beautiful, and you deserve to be celebrated." Her shoulders softened, just slightly. "I didn't mean to make you feel—" "You didn't need to mean it," I said. "You just did it." She blinked, then nodded. "Are you happy, Sabrina?" The question surprised me. I took my time answering. "I'm at peace," I said. "I built a life I don't have to prove to anyone. That's more than happiness." She nodded again. It wasn't an apology, not quite. But maybe the closest she could get. When I returned to the reception, the cake had been cut. People were dancing. A few guests smiled at me as I passed, but I didn't linger. Cale caught my eye from across the room and lifted his glass. This time, it was a nod of respect, not habit. I didn't return the gesture. I had no more to prove. I gathered my clutch, stepped outside, and called for a car. The air was crisp, the kind that clears the mind. As I waited at the curb, I glanced at the wedding invitations still tucked inside my purse. Cream cardstock, embossed names. Aubrey and Cameron. Elegant, curated, expected. I didn't belong in that world, but I didn't need to. Because sometimes reclaiming your place isn't about crashing the party. It's about reminding them you were on the guest list all along. There's a strange kind of power in silence. When it's chosen, not forced. For years, I let people fill in the blanks about who I was. I let them call me quiet, weird, aimless. I let them talk over me at dinners, skip over my name in introductions, forget my birthday while they posted glowing tributes to Aubrey's every minor promotion. And I stayed silent, not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew I only needed one moment, one sentence, spoken at the right time, to the right person, in the right tone. Not a speech, not a monologue, not an outburst, just precision, controlled impact, like lighting a match in a dry forest. That night at the wedding, I didn't just reclaim my place, I reminded them I'd never left, that the version of me they ignored was never the real one. I'd grown beyond their definitions, and I no longer needed their permission to exist. Cale would remember me, so would Aubrey, so would the people who laughed quietly before the champagne dropped. And long after the wedding photos faded, they'd still remember the shift in the room when I spoke. But I wouldn't carry any of them with me, not as burdens, not as goals, not as validation, because when you've built your own foundation, you don't owe anyone a blueprint. Just presence, quiet certainty, a name they'll Google when the room clears. And sometimes that's all it takes. One sentence, delivered like a scalpel, remembered like a scar.